I'm sure we've all been to a happy hour or 50, whether it's in the interest of networking or in an effort to not think about work at all. But have you ever really thought about the liquid that ends up in your glass? Today on Shak, we have Shernell Layne, who is a chemical engineer and technical sales manager at Lallemand Biofuels and Distilled Spirits, which is one of the leading fermentation ingredient suppliers to both the fuel ethanol and distilled spirits industries. Welcome, Shernell, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so very much for having me.
So tell us what your role as a technical sales manager for biofuels and distilled spirits looks like. You know, what do you do?
Well, that's a very good question. My role is very diverse, and it really allows me to be very hands-on and analytical, and it does entail quite a bit of travel. So these are all things that I like to do. The main focus in my role is really to provide technical support and training to distillery personnel at distilleries in the Caribbean, but also in the US. So these are any person who's making spirits such as rum, gin, vodka, whiskey, and bourbon.
Okay.
It really also entails, all the good stuff. It also entails a lot of troubleshooting, process issues, identifying any areas of concerns with process efficiency, whether it's something that's operational or if it's a process design issue itself. It entails doing plant audits, looking at how the plant, if it has any sanitary concerns or bottlenecks, which affect the throughput and the operation of the process. I'm also very much involved in distillery startups and improvement projects, but also get to participate a lot in industry conferences and events. So, like I said, it's very diverse. I do quite a bit of things, but all very fun and interesting.
I have to say, it definitely does sound like an interesting job, and from the travel pics, it does seem to have its perks.
Yes.
But what part of the job would you say you are the most passionate about? I guess what gets you up in the morning?
Apart from the travel, because I do love to travel, it's the flexibility and the versatility that my role allows. My career choice as a chemical engineer, I knew that I would have versatility and lots of options in terms of what kind of industry I would be able to work in. So just knowing that I have that flexibility and varying options keeps me going.
Okay. So have you always wanted to be a chemical engineer? And I guess what was your experience like pursuing this particular discipline in Canada and the UK?
Asking this question, honestly, maybe 30 years ago, I think I would have said something like, I'm going to be either a neurologist or a neuroscientist, something along that line, because I really was interested in the whole area of neurology and just how the central nervous system works and all this kind of stuff. But in my teenage years, I really realized that my interest for biological science was not as strong as my interest in things like chemistry, physics, and mathematics. And then I began to just investigate, what engineering was all about. I was always interested in how things worked the way they did, why did they work that way, how they were made, and stuff like that. So my curiosity, and my passion and just analytical nature led me to chemical engineering. As I said, I wanted something that would give me diversity in terms of career options. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I know you studied in Canada and the UK, and I imagine, engineering is not a field that is filled with maybe a lot of Black females, but, maybe you could tell me if that was your experience in Canada and the UK, or, maybe it wasn't.
What can I say? My experience at university was interesting. I think for me, that was the first time that I really became aware of what racism was. I grew up all my life in Barbados. I left and I went to Canada to pursue this degree, and I got to an environment where I was the only Black girl in most of my classes. I didn't have any Black professors. There were very few people that I saw who looked like me in the engineering department itself. And then I had this one particular professor who was just really strange and rude, because I was performing at the top of my class. I was on the dean's list. And this professor just continued to say to me, I think you should, while you're pursuing this degree, I think you should look to go to Hollywood and become an actress like Halle Berry. And I kept thinking,
Wow.
What are you really saying to me? And he would say it like on more than one occasion. I just couldn't understand. And then, you know, you get the questions like, well, what do your parents do for a living? How can you afford to pay these fees? Why do you want to be an engineer? You know, there's so many options for you. Why don't you go look to pick up a trade or do a craft? And I was like,
wow,
really happening. But, you know, I got past that initial shock and I really remained focused on what the price and bottom line was for me. I became very much involved in a lot of student groups on campus, especially this group called the National Society of Black Engineers.
Okay.
And that really allowed me to meet like-minded students, and it made my experience significantly better.
Okay.
For my UK degree, I actually did that by distance learning, so that was a lot easier. I studied at my own pace. I didn't have to really interact with
Fair enough.
students per se. So yeah, that was the challenge. For that was that I was also working full time in the manufacturing industry, which was 24-hour operation. So I was always on call, but I needed to find time somewhere in my busy schedule just to get all the work done.
Okay, that is interesting. So rum is something that is deeply embedded into the history and culture of Barbados and the region. You know, did this factor into you finding your way into a career in the alcohol industry, or was that kind of purely by accident?
Honestly, it was purely by accident. Initially, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do after graduation, I had plans of having a job in the oil and gas industry. So which is relatively similar to what I'm doing now, because it still involves unit operations like distillation and separation and stuff like that. But upon graduation, I wasn't able to find a job in Canada. So as an international student, I really had to relocate back. And returning back, I applied for jobs, and my options here were limited, but I was able to get a post as a engineering management trainee at Goddard Enterprises Limited. So it was an 18-month program, and I was just working on numerous engineering and management projects at all their manufacturing facilities. I think it was like 9 months into the program, I got a call, and they were like, you know, your next assignment is going to be at West Indies Rum Distillery. We think you're performing very well, and we'd actually like to offer you a position as an assistant production manager. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm cutting this management training program short, and I'm going full-fledged into a management role, having employees reporting to me and what's not. Yeah, so that's why I ended up in the rum making business. I've been doing it now for about 16 years.
Wow, okay. So, well, I guess you kind of found this career, or it found you. So tell us a bit about, I guess, the alcohol making process. Maybe there are some interesting things that lead to consumer satisfaction, I guess. You know, maybe you could tell us a bit about that process. I think people don't really think about that as much.
Okay, well, I want to share some basic secrets with you, but please, I am in no way encouraging anyone to go off and start making alcohol in their kitchen and making moonshine and all these kind of things.
So don't try this at home then.
Do not try this at home. Definitely not. Definitely not. But I say alcohol can basically be made by 2 steps. So the first step is the fermentation process. And this is the most critical part of alcohol production. This is where yeast converts sugars into alcohol, energy, and a number of flavor components that we call congeners. Now, anybody who has indulged in distilled spirits, with the exceptions of maybe, well, not even with all, more or less, have an idea of what they smell like and what they taste like. When you open that bottle or you pour your first glass and you're approaching your mouth with it, first thing you get is a smell.
Yes.
And that's what entices people. People like certain things. So the fermentation process basically converts the sugar in whatever raw material you're using to not only alcohol, but to all these flavor compounds.
Okay.
After the fermentation process, then what we call fermented beer or wash goes to the distillation process, where all these components are basically separated based on their variations in boiling points.
Mm-hmm.
So the alcohol comes off at various strengths depending on what it is that you want to make and how you're going to operate your still. There are different still designs that can be used to make, whether it's rum, gin, vodka, whiskey, whatever.
Okay.
If you're making just a neutral alcohol that you are then going to maybe add maybe some flavors to it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
your process more or less ends at distillation until you add those flavors.
Okay.
If you want to make a rum or whiskey, it then has to go through a maturation or aging process in a barrel for maybe 2 years, 3 years, depending on where the product is being made and also what you're actually making.
Okay.
So that's rum production in a in a simple sense.
In a
And alcohol
nutshell.
production
Okay.
in a simple sense. Then if you want to do things like let's say make surgical alcohol or denatured alcohol, it's pretty much the same process. It's just then once it comes off the still, you add some agents to it that make it not fit for human consumption, because you're not going to use the same alcohol that you use in surgery in a bottle for somebody to drink.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that was actually pretty interesting. Don't worry, I won't try that at home. So chemical engineering and the alcohol industry are still very much male-dominated industries, which is interesting because I was actually reading there was a time when brewing was not so uncommon to women. So maybe you can share some insights on women in brewing in general and your own personal experience within this industry.
Okay, well, brewing has really been in existence for several decades, and women honestly have played a very critical role in the brewing industry. Let's go back thousands of years, places like ancient Egypt, where women were heavily involved in brewing and bread making, which in themselves are fermentation sciences. And those were domestic tasks that fell to the women of the household. So women have been involved in this for a very long time. There was a period then in the mid-18th century where commercialization of brewing took place. We started to see the occurrence of craft brewing, but it was becoming a male-dominated industry. So women weren't very heavily involved at that time. Their roles were declining. They were still involved in it from the aspect of being like tavern owners and stuff like that. But in terms of brewing itself, they weren't involved. Fast forward to today, we've seen again a reemergence of women in the brewing industry. We have women who are, whether they're chemists or lead scientists at a craft brewery, if they own their own brewery, or if they've gone on to become brew masters at some of the leading brewing companies like Miller Coors and Anheuser-Busch and stuff like that. So women are again making their mark, making their mark in brewing.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, in terms of my experience in a male-dominated industry, it's been interesting and it's been very motivating for me. I think, from my point of view, I think the biggest challenge that's faced in the industry is one of egos. And women are often underestimated. That's been my experience. You know, I've been told it's a man's world. A distillery is no place for a woman. I've been in situations where I've been overlooked for projects and even had male colleagues receive credit for all the work that I have done. You know, and I got to a point where I'm just like, you know what? I can ignore people and their egos. I can ignore their insecurities. I let the underestimation motivate me because I have a strong sense of who I am. I know everything I need to know about getting my job done. I am quite competent and able to do my job. And for me, my focus is always on continuous improvement to ensure that I have the knowledge, the know-how, the experience, and the tools to do my job. So in the grand scheme of things, honestly, I would say working in a male-dominated industry has made me stronger. It has made me more focused, and it's made me more determined to be a success.
Okay, I think that sounds good. So I mean, we talk about the male-dominated industry. What do you think we can do to encourage more girls to pursue studies in STEM, which, as you know, is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And what do you
Yeah.
think is the significance of increasing the number of women following these kinds of career paths?
Well, believe it or not, in the year 2020, women are still very much underrepresented in science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's not from a lack of having the intellectual ability. I mean, girls have the intellectual capacity to succeed in STEM. I think the two main things that discourage girls from pursuing STEM careers is negative stereotypes about their intellectual abilities, and then also stereotypes that people who are focused on STEM are nerds, and nobody wants to be considered a nerd.
So we have to make STEM cool.
Yeah, nobody wants to be called a nerd. But I think, Jerry, there are quite a few things that can be done, and I think it must start from a young age. I think parents and teachers definitely have a role to play. Parents more so, if you realize that your child has an interest in science, technology, math, engineering, anything like that, encourage them. There's this belief often that because you're a girl, you're supposed to want to play with dolls and you're interested in nail polish and makeup. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with these things, but I'm saying if you realize that your child has other interests, then focus on those interests. Let the girls play with Lego. Give them science kits. I mean, I have two nieces and I encourage them to do all this kind of stuff. Don't limit them, because you have to start them from an early age. It's a long process. They have to go through teenage years. They have to be comfortable with themselves. They have to know what their intellectual abilities are. Do not stifle them. Let them build things. Even if you have to monitor them. I say it's important for teachers as well to encourage their students. If they're interested in science and engineering and math and technology, work with them. We need to have science fairs in the schools. The university can do things like having science fairs where they invite primary school or secondary school students to participate. Let's have math marathons and math competitions. Let's have building projects. Encourage girls to participate in these things. That's the only way they're gonna believe in themselves and understand that they can do it if they put their minds to it. It's also important for them to have role models. Now, it may be a bit of a challenge because I am not sure in terms of percentage how many females we have here in STEM careers in Barbados, but it's important to find a role model for them. Get them to do some internships, partner with whatever few companies there are on the island to get a summer internship for your daughter. Find a mentor and a role model for her so she can understand what her career choices are, get an understanding for what that individual has been through, so they can tell her, okay, these are some of the do's and don'ts. These are the things to look out for. These are the benefits of the career path that you're going to choose.
Yeah, and I mean, now that you mentioned that, I did notice that recently BAPE, they had for International Women in Engineering Day, they did have a video kind of highlighting some women in engineering, and I thought that was quite positive.
Yes, I did think so as well, because women engineers are often overlooked.
So, but hopefully, we can do some more things to encourage.
Oh yes, definitely. But it has to start from early, and they have to be confident and also believe in themselves, because it's not going to be an easy career path. I would never tell anybody that it's going to be easy. There are going to be challenges. There are going to be times where you're going to ask yourself, do I really want this? Why am I really doing this? But if you are really passionate about it and you really want it, then you give it all you've got and you just go for it.
Yep. I think that sounds like good advice. So I know you're also a member of the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, and you sit on their examination board. So tell me a bit about that institute and the kind of the path to sitting on that particular board.
Well, this has been a very short but fulfilling path. So my first year that I started working with Lallemand, I was asked to do a presentation on rum production at the alcohol school, right? By the director of the Ethanol Technology Institute, who is a gentleman named Dr. Graham Walker. And he's also a member of the Institute of Brewing and Distilling. And I had met Graham a few years prior to joining Lallemand. I had traveled to Scotland to do a presentation at the World Distilled Spirits Conference on some research I had done on the effects of using antibiotics and antimicrobial products in fermentation. So in discussions with Graham, he said to me, the Institute was looking to recruit some younger professionals who had industry experience, but who also had interest in improving the way things were currently being done. They wanted to improve the course material that they were offering to the students. So I received an email from the director of the Institute. We had a few discussions and short interviews because I had been recommended by Dr. Walker. And after the initial meetings, I just knew it was something that I really wanted to be a part of. And yeah, I would say the rest is history. So the Institute really focuses a lot on education. So it's education for both the brewing and distilling industries. They offer anything from certificate levels in both brewing and distilling. They also offer diploma levels, and then there's also a master brewer and master distilling program as well. So I initially started out just sitting on the board of examiners. So my role really is to set the exam papers for students who are doing the certificate and distilling, diploma in distilling examinations. This is now year 3. In year 2, I was then contacted by the director again and asked if I would be willing to actually write the course material for the certificate and diploma programs. And of course I said yes. This is my opportunity to also introduce rum on a more international stage, because it is the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, but a lot of the work was focused on whiskey. That's they cover all spirits, but they wanted to expand the scope of what they were offering, because one of the things that the Institute is really looking to do is to bring a lot more international members into the organization. It is a large organization, over 3,000 people, but you find there is the international chapter is very small, and obviously we don't have a lot of people from the Caribbean or this side of the world being actively involved, because the course content did not cover a lot of rum production. So I thought this was my opportunity to really make a difference and to enhance what they were offering, so that we could get more persons joining and becoming members of the Institute, and just getting the general knowledge that they're required to do their jobs better.
That's actually pretty interesting in terms of including rum. That's kind of cool. So if you had a chance to make changes within this industry, I mean, I realize that you are doing a lot of stuff, some of what you mentioned there in terms of including rum and that kind of thing, I guess on the curriculum, but what kind of changes would you like to see within the industry if you had, if you had the power to make some changes or a change, what would that look like?
I think the first thing that I would really like to see happen is more inclusivity of women. Yes, the industry is growing to the point where, yes, there are a lot more women involved, but I would like to see women on executive boards and committees, because women have a lot to bring to the distilling industry. Women are not only very analytical, but women have a strong sense of smell. One of the things that's important in this industry, you have to be able to do what we call organoleptic testing on a product. Before any product goes into a bottle or is shipped out to a customer, you have to be able to assess your product, you have to nose it, you have to taste it. You have to be able to detect whatever defects there are in the product. And that's the kind of stuff that women are good at. I don't know if it's something in our genetic makeup, but we're good at that stuff. We're good at seeing defects. If it's a defect in a bottle, whether it's a crack, whether it's we pick up these things. We notice these things. So women do have a lot to contribute to the industry. They're creative in terms of product development and all these kinds of things. And the industry is moving to a point where there is lots of premiumization of products, and people are looking at new and innovative ways of doing things, because yes, there are some people who may like whiskey the way it was 20 years ago, or rum the way it was 20 years ago, but we're dealing with newer generations now. The cocktail industry is very big. People are getting very creative with what kind of cocktails they want, how they're mixing drinks. So women can definitely play a significant role in all of these things. So I really think inclusivity of women Also, I think I would like to see a more focus on training and education in the industry. We've seen the emergence of, or the boom of craft distilling all across the world. And it may be, for many, just a hobby. Somebody may have a lot of money and may just decide one day, I just want to have my own gin or my own vodka. I'm going to get a license and start making stuff out of my garage, or I'm going to build a small distillery next to my house, or whatever the case may be. And it's becoming a hobby. But I think it's important that people are formally trained and understand what it is that they're really doing. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with alcohol. Yes, you need to have a license to produce it. It is a flammable product. You're operating equipment at high pressures, high temperatures, all these kind of things. So it's important that people really understand the science and technology behind what it is they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think also for me, in terms of contribution, just generally to continue with advancement and dissemination of knowledge in the industry through hands-on training, and someday, maybe publishing a technical book on all aspects of fermentation science as it relates to rum production, as well as distillation from a rum perspective. Right now, there are very few books anywhere that give a very detailed description of what happens in rum production. And I think that's something that's lacking in the industry. The industry is going to be here for quite some time, and I think it's important that it's everything that happens is well documented. So I would, at some point, like to work on a book. There's lots of books on whiskey production and bourbon production and all this kind of stuff, but very, very few on rum. So that would be one change that I would definitely like to, or one contribution I would definitely like to make to the industry.
Well, definitely, I could imagine that, the Barbadian and Caribbean industry would be pleased with that kind of development for sure.
Yeah.
So my last question then, knowing what you know and doing what you do, does it make you extra critical when you go out for drinks? And what's your favorite drink?
On the spot. I am not extra critical, to be honest. I am really not a drinker.
Okay.
People find it hard to believe, given the industry that I am in. For me, I like the hands-on and analytical side of things. I like the troubleshooting side of things. If I go, most of the time you will see me with maybe a bottle of water in my hand. But that's not to say that I have not or have never tasted alcohol. Yes, I have tasted alcohol. I don't have any issues with the consumption of alcohol. With anything else, I think it must be done responsibly.
Yeah.
In terms of a preference, if I had to drink any kind of spirit, I usually have Chardonnay, but
nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so that's my drink of preference.
Okay, fair enough.
To be honest, I'm not much into the harder spirits, and if I do partake, let's say I go to one of my clients and they're putting a new product out on the market, or they just want my opinion, and I have to do some testing on it and what's not, I tend to move more towards I have a preference for the sweeter, sweeter thing. So I would prefer a rum that has a bit of a sweeter note to it, a whiskey that's a bit sweet. I don't like things that are peated. So yeah, I tend to move towards the sweeter side.
Nothing wrong with sweet.
The sweeter side of things.
So thanks so much for joining us today, Shernell. It definitely has been interesting to find out a bit more about what goes into my glass. So thanks again.
You are very welcome anytime.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to join us every other Wednesday for another episode of Shak. Subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast platform. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also connect with us on IG, Facebook, and Twitter, or by email at akilia@shakshak.club. Let's shake things up.